Okay, so good morning, and today we are talking about stress and its effect on health. So before we start, I just want to probe your knowledge or typical experiences. Is the association with stress negative or positive? When you when you hear the word stress, do you think something positive or negative?
Negative?
Negative, yes. Why is that?
Because it gives you tension and makes you feel uncomfortable
That's good, yes. Okay.
and gives you tummy pain, I think.
It could give you nervousness
Yeah.
in your abdominal area or your tummy, your stomach. That's true. Okay, what kind of situations do we find stressful in the sense that it gives us negative stress?
Exam time?
Exam time, yes. Tests, that's true. What else?
Interview?
Yes, interviews can be very stressful. Or anxiety inducing, yes. New experiences, okay. What do you mean new experiences? What kind of new experiences? Okay, that's true. New job or new school, yes. New country. So all of such situations trigger stressful reactions. And how do we experience stress? When we feel the negative consequences of stress, what are the usual symptoms?
Sorry, what is it?
Yes, when we experience the negative consequences of stress, what are the usual symptoms?
Hand sweating?
Yes.
Um, Headache?
Headache?
Yeah. And then anxiety, like the heartbeat raise up.
Yeah, higher heartbeat or heart rate, yes. That's true. Sweaty hands. Some people get jittery. Some people get jittery, shaky.
Yeah.
Shorter breath or irregular breaths. What else? What other typical symptoms can you identify?
Increase your hunger. I think hungry.
Okay.
Okay.
You think okay, so that is your experience? You get hungry when you're stressed out?
Yeah, like you eat a lot.
Mm-hmm. So, but you eat because you're nervous or you eat because you're hungry? Those are two
No,
different.
stress relief.
Yes, I think it's stress
Like
relief.
I used to, not now anymore.
Okay, I see. Yeah, that's true. Some people eat because out of nervousness, out of feeling the negative consequences of stress, putting things in their mouths makes makes people maybe a little bit calmer, or maybe it's the illusion of doing something pleasurable by putting things in their mouths. So that's usually something related to food or drinking, or some people do smoking. And it's basically stimulating the oral area, but food is definitely one of the items that gives us pleasure. So one way to fight stress is to do something that we associate usually with pleasure, which is eating.
And also they take drugs also, like weed.
Yes, some people do drugs or smoke drugs or swallow drugs. That's true, but it's a way. Yeah, it's a way of coping with stress. And yeah, drugs are usually negative, have usually exacerbate or magnify the negative consequences or symptoms of stress. In some situations, they can maybe help short term, but in the long term, when people abuse drugs, then that sets in a negative spiral, a negative spiral of consequences. So it's not the right way to cope with stress, that's for sure. Well, the research shows this. Okay, can stress be positive?
I think so, but right now I don't have any example of it.
Okay, anyone else? So think about the exam situation or the test situation or the interview situation or an assignment situation. The stress that you experience, what does it do as opposed to now if you maybe this way, if you were not stressed, would you be motivated to do an exam?
No.
Right? So the function of stress is to do what then? Psychologically and behaviorally. What's the function of stress then?
That's a very hard question.
But I think yes, Francis. So yeah, stress is definitely motivating. It pushes us to engage in specific behaviors. It pushes us to get up early in the morning. It pushes us to study, to make time, to prepare for interviews, to do many things that we do in our lives. So this, general arousal that we feel, or general arousal or anxiety, mild anxiety, is actually good for us. It motivates us, and it gets us ready to engage in specific activities for specific goals, to attain specific goals. So that is positive. If we didn't feel stress, if we didn't feel mild anxiety, if we didn't feel nervousness, then we wouldn't do it. If we didn't basically feel this overall arousal or urgency to engage in specific actions, to pursue goals, then we wouldn't attain them. We wouldn't be motivated. So that is basically, in general, the function of stress. The other function of stress is to protect the body. So if a human body or an animal, if a human being or an animal sees or is in a stressful situation or life-threatening situation, then the human being or an animal will engage in specific behaviors, self-protective behaviors. It will either attack, or it will run away, flee. And again, that is possible because stress levels go up, and then the body, because of that, the body is ready to act in a specific manner. And it's usually is so that it can protect itself in a specific environment. So stress is motivating, and stress also protects the body. But when stress is prolonged, it's heightened and it's prolonged for a long period of time, it can be quite dangerous, and it can be debilitating, and it can even lead to death. So we'll talk about positive, farther in this section, we'll talk about positive consequences and negative consequences. But we will mostly focus, today I will mostly focus on the negative consequences of heightened and prolonged stress. And also this chapter describes ways of coping and managing stress, because stress is such a fundamental bodily and psychological state, just like emotions and motivation. So when we manage stress well, then basically our lives are better, our lives are more meaningful, we are happier, and we live longer. And when the opposite, and when we don't know how to cope with stress, then the opposite takes place. We are less happy, we live shorter lives, and we suffer more from more sicknesses or ailments. So what we consider to be stressful has to do with our appraisal, a given situation, and we evaluate whether an event or a situation is stressful to us. And without this evaluation, really our bodies wouldn't react the way we do, or we wouldn't psychologically react the way we do. So for example, when you're driving a car and all of a sudden someone cuts you off or does not abide by traffic laws, that is an alarming situation. And we either honk at people, or we slam on our brakes, or we get really nervous. Sometimes people show the middle finger, right? So that is a stressful situation because we appraise it, we evaluate it as stressful. And that is because we think that other drivers in such situations are a threat to our well-being on the road. So this is quite common during traffic hours, or just general traffic, driving on the road, walking on the street, flying an airplane. Usually people find flying, even though they may say that flying is enjoyable, and it is enjoyable to some extent, but it also gives people quite a bit of stress, because it's a situation in which we do not have any control of what is happening. Everything is out of our control. And therefore we appraise it, we evaluate it cognitively as more stressful than, for instance, driving, where we have our hands on the wheel, we can press the gas pedal or the brake pedal whenever we choose to, or whenever we should, and that gives us a sense of control. So these are good examples of how we appraise stress and what we consider to be mildly stressful, as opposed to acutely or severely stressful. So again, it's important when it comes to the test or exam, as you mentioned earlier, or other situations, it's important to also prepare, because when you study for an exam, even though it is stressful, or when you prepare for an interview, even though it is stressful in itself, you may appraise or perceive the test or exam or assignment or interview as a challenge, versus a really stressful negative situation that you cannot control, you cannot bear. And that is a big difference. When we consider situations or events as challenges, then we are motivated, we are more motivated, and we usually do better. And we are not overwhelmed by the stressful situation. But when we consider the situation as highly stressful and where we are not in control and we're not up to the challenge, then the situation can be quite overwhelming for us. And in such situations, we usually do worse. We do worse on tests, we do worse on interviews, and we do worse in other situations. So perceiving stresses as challenges is positive. Perceiving stresses or stressors as overwhelming is negative. So that is important to remember. And stressors, everyday stressors, come in many different shapes and sizes and types. So traffic on the road, school in general can be quite rewarding and motivating, but at the same time quite stressful. And I understand exactly what you're going through, because I studied for a long time, and it was also, even though it was enjoyable, it was also quite stressful. And many jobs can be stressful. So being a student is a type of a job. It's a type of work that you do, with specific deadlines and specific criteria and specific expectations for success and so on. So my job comes with specific stresses or stressors, that I have to manage and cope with on a regular basis, that I have to appraise as mostly as challenges, not as overwhelming situations, because otherwise I wouldn't do what I do, or I wouldn't find it rewarding. And it's the same for other professions, whether someone works as a cashier, works as an Uber driver, or is a pilot, or works at a warehouse, or works at a bank, whatever it may be. Each position or each profession comes with its own stressors. And when it comes to stressors that are heightened or acute and prolonged, then we go from, and I'll talk about this in more detail, but we go from an alarm stage to an exhaustion, a stage of exhaustion. And during a stage of exhaustion, people break down. Their bodies break down, their mental states, they break down psychologically, and which could, unfortunately, in some cases, lead to death. So stress, as people commonly say, is a killer, and it can be, because it breaks down the body, it breaks down organs, internal organs, and it breaks us down psychologically. Therefore, it is very important to learn how to cope with stress, how to live with stress, and how to appraise stressful situations, or how to prepare for stressful situations from the perspective of a challenge, as opposed to overwhelming or unbearable situation. So again, I've mentioned this notion of appraisal, cognitive appraisal, how we appraise situations, whether we see them, deem them, or see them or perceive them as stressful negatively or as challenges. An exam or test or assignment are very good examples of this. And as you have mentioned, significant life changes like a new job or moving from one country to another can be quite stressful, but many people do it on a regular basis. And some people cope better, some people cope worse, depends on their personality, depends on how they appraise stressors, and depends on their ability to cope, methods of coping. So catastrophes, natural catastrophes can be quite stressful. Flooding, we've had quite a bit of flooding in British Columbia in Canada. There are also other natural catastrophes or disasters that take place around the world, like fires, flooding, hurricanes, tsunamis. They can be quite stressful and debilitating to human beings. Based on research, those who experience catastrophes years later develop specific illnesses or sicknesses due to specific stressors. So some people may suffer from cardiovascular diseases, or some people may suffer from cancer, or some people can suffer from high blood pressure, obesity, insomnia, because of specific extreme stressors, such as natural catastrophes or natural disasters. And the same thing goes for life changes, such as death, or divorce, or marriage. Marriage can be quite stressful. Divorces can be very stressful. Losing a loved one, a death in the family, such events are also very stressful. And unless we know or learn how to cope, or we have a good support system, they can be long-term quite negative or debilitating. And in general, daily hassles are stressful, or we consider them as stressors. So again, traffic, shopping, holiday shopping, especially now where, when you go to the mall, you have to wear a mask. For example, for myself, I don't have a problem with wearing a mask because I know it's important, but I avoid going to stores when I have to wear a mask for a longer period of time. So I avoid going to the mall because the mask, after a certain period of time, maybe half an hour, starts to bother me, and in my mouth, my lips inside the mask get sweaty, and then I have to take off my mask, and then I have to wipe my nose or my cheeks, and then I have to put on the mask, and it's just a hassle. In order to avoid it, in order to avoid frustration, I stay away, or I go in very quickly, pick up something that I need, and then I'm out, because I just don't want to deal with that hassle for too long. So life just presents on daily basis a whole bunch of many hassles that we have to deal and cope on a regular basis. And that is just, nature of life. There's no way of escaping it. If it's not one thing, then it's something else. But nevertheless, we can live and we can cope with stressors. And we do, because we go on living and we go on thriving. We have families, we have people who are in relationships, they pursue professions, they engage in career changes. So that means people thrive, people on daily basis. That means human beings are capable of dealing with stress. And in in one immediate reaction to a stressful situation, whether it's in sports or in other situations, whether it's the world of specific professions or employment related, people provide support to others, even though they may be rivals. So in this case, marathon runners or walkers during Olympics, even though they're rivals, during competition, they show support and empathy for one another in order to overcome stressors. And this is not only an example. This is not only the case during professional sports, but it's also it takes place in our daily lives. Our family is our support system, but even though our families can be quite stressful or stress inducing, and we can think of our family members also as a hassle to deal with, which is true for every family. But at the same time, our family gives us support, and research shows that when we get support from our family members or groups of friends, or that is friends around us, then human beings cope with stress better, and we live happier and healthier lives because of it. So being surrounded by loving and understanding family or animals, pets, friends is quite important for coping with stress in long term. Okay, do you have any questions as I'm moving along? Okay, then I'll just move along. So as I said, stress, heightened and prolonged stress, because this is important to remember the difference. Stress that motivates us and challenges us on a daily basis is good. But stress that is heightened, acute, and prolonged, especially when it's prolonged and not dealt with in the right manner, is negative, has negative consequences long term. So stress is correlated positively with cancer, with heart disease. And in order to avoid that, people need to tap into specific coping mechanisms or adopt coping mechanisms, and also learn how to think critically about stress and one's own situation behaviorally and psychologically in the face of stress. Otherwise, stress can be, again, overwhelming and debilitating. So one way to study how human beings react to stressors or stressful situations is to zero in or focus on how our psychological states affect our bodily states and our immune system. So this is a branch of psychology and also medicine. It's called psychoneuroimmunology. So psycho has to do with psychology or psychological states. Neuro has to do with brain or brain mechanisms, and immunology has to do with the immune system. Now, all of these components are interlaced or working, they interact together. So there's a reciprocal connection between what we do psychologically, how we function psychologically, what the brain does, and how that influences the immune system, and vice versa, how the immune system helps or prevents us from functioning optimally or in a healthy manner, bodily and psychologically. So, as you've learned, emotions affect the brain, or there are specific centers within the brain, like the limbic system or the amygdala, that control specific or give rise to specific emotional reactions. And then, but that in effect controls the endocrine system or endocrine hormones, which influence the immune system. So, and the specific hormone here is cortisol, that is released during stressful situations or during situations where stressful situations, stressors are acute and they are prolonged. So the way our immune system works or functions, or it's modulated, is there. That depends on specific factors. So our immune system changes with age, so it's affected by age, by what we eat. It's important to have a proper intake of nutrition and variety of nutrition, a proper diet, if you will. Our genetic makeup, what we inherit basically from our ancestors and our parents, body temperature, and stress. Okay, so stress here, in general, everything that I have said so far. So the immune system is very important in our bodies. When you get when our immune systems fight bacteria and infections and cancerous cells and viral cells on regular basis. But when our immune system is compromised by our lifestyle, by stressors or drinking or smoking or drug use or debilitating prolonged stress, such as natural disasters, catastrophes, or specific situations or death in a family or other stressful situations, then our immune system is hampered. And then we are more susceptible to get sick, more susceptible to cancer, more susceptible to obesity, high blood pressure, cardiovascular diseases, and other problems. It may also be the case that an immune system responds too strongly. And when that's the case, it attacks its own tissues and body. So, for example, the immune system of women is usually stronger than men, and that is most likely due to evolutionary factors, because a woman is capable of giving birth, and when a woman is in labor, her nervous system and her immune system has to take care of two beings, one adult and one developing being. So the baby, the pregnancy itself is an invasion of her body, a woman's body. And from an evolutionary perspective, a woman's immune system has to be stronger than of men's, because men don't have to go through such stressful events, or event, that is, or process, the process of labor and then later on bearing a child. So it's in some situations, women develop multiple sclerosis, which is a way of the immune system attacking its own body. And there are other, autoimmune syndromes or diseases that people suffer from, and this is due to or it's caused by the immune system going into overdrive or into hyper mode when it starts to attack its own environment, the environment of one's body, that is. So this is when the immune system overreacts or is in hyperdrive or overdrive. And when it underperforms because it's hampered by specific stressors, then or diseases, then it underreacts. So when the immune system underreacts, it allows infections, and infections, viral or bacterial, usually take place when the immune system is suppressed. And it could be suppressed by stressors. So lack of regular sleep. Students usually get sick, get a cold or a flu, or maybe, something worse when after exam sessions or during exam sessions, because the exam session is so stressful. Students don't eat regularly, they stay up late, they don't get enough sleep, which is very important for regulating the central nervous system and the immune system. And because of that, they get sick. And this has been shown statistically that students develop cold and flu and other ailments or sicknesses during and after exam sessions. So when that takes place, we get sick, we get a cold or flu, or we are more susceptible to specific viruses. We heal slower. And even if when we are sick, if we are already sick, and there's some sort of bacterial or viral infection or whatever it may be, the immune system has to fight that on a regular basis. Now, when you add an additional stressor, let's say an exam session or a life event that's quite stressful, to the mix, then that additionally hampers or weighs on the immune system, and whatever sickness or ailments one may experience will worsen because of that additional stressor. And that takes place because the immune system is additionally hampered by stress or work, and therefore cannot perform or do as well in order to fight one already existing problem. An additional problem or additional stress is just adding more weight, if you will, and can lead to or speed up the process of getting worse or to a breaking point. The process of becoming more sicker, that is, or getting worse, or a breaking point. So be mindful, okay? Don't, when you're already in a stressful situation or something stressful is happening that already in your life that already has negative consequences or affects you negatively, avoid additional stressors. Don't put yourself additionally in a situation where your body is additionally hampered or weighed down. Okay, be mindful of your decisions and what you do with your body and how you think psychologically and how you think, that is, or act in generally cognitively or psychologically, because additional stressors will additionally hamper and make the current situation even worse. So the immune system reacts in specific ways to specific, stressors, outside stressors, or bacteria or viruses that enter the environment of our bodies. So we have, B lymphocytes. And this is just a general. The immune system is quite complex and rich, but here's just a few markers that stand out in the way our immune systems fight intruders or stressors. So we have B lymphocytes, which fight bacterial infections. We have T lymphocytes, which attack cancer cells, viruses, and foreign substances. So, for example, with SARS-CoV-2, which gives rise to COVID-19, symptoms of COVID-19, the immune system has its own way of fighting viruses, but and some people get infected and they fight off the infection, the virus, or they fight the virus successfully, but some people don't, and that depends on a few factors, and the factors that I have mentioned earlier. So it depends on age, it depends on the state of his or her or a patient's immune system. Is it a healthy immune system? Is it unhealthy? Is it hampered by additional stressors? Is it hampered already by a sickness, existing sickness, or underlying conditions? So people who suffer from obesity or cardiovascular diseases or cancer are additionally hampered in face of COVID-19. And such patients have to be very careful not to allow additional stressors or infections into the body, because that could mean death for them, because such patients are already hampered or weighed or compromised by whatever syndromes or sicknesses or ailments they are dealing with. And if you add additional stressor, such as an additional infection, viral infection in this case, then that could unfortunately end in death. So that's why people who were compromised, or people in the healthcare system, had access to vaccines first, and then the rest of society. So people like myself, or persons like myself, who don't suffer from debilitating diseases or compromised health, we had to wait, right? And our turn, so that people who are compromised get vaccinated first, and then the rest of the public can follow. And you can see that also with age. People who are older are vaccinated first. People who are younger, vaccinated later, because their immune systems are healthier and just more robust and stronger to fight stressors or infections or intruders better and faster on a regular basis than older people. There are other cells macrophages or natural killer cells, big eaters or NK cells, which attack harmful invaders and worn out cells, and natural killers that attack diseased cells. So there, as you can see, the immune system is quite robust and it's ready to act. But when the immune system is already compromised by a sickness or by a disease or lack of sleep or other stressors, then it cannot perform its job at its optimum level. And when that's the case, it underperforms and it allows for more infections and more problems for the body. So the quick lesson here for everyone is take care of your immune system. Avoid additional stressors. Eat well. Sleep well. Sleep is very, very important. When you're studying, don't stay up all night. But if you have to stay up, then make sure you get a few hours of sleep before you do. So, if you're running out of time and you're thinking, okay, I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight, then because I have an assignment and I have an exam in the morning, okay, that is very stressful. I understand, and I've been in such situations many times in my life. But even in such situations, make sure you eat well and make sure you get at least 4 or 5 hours of sleep. So let's say in the evening, you sleep from 7 to 12 or 7 to 1 or 2 a.m. and then you wake up and then you study from 2 to 7 a.m. and that is going to give you a boost. That is going to re-energize you and help re-energize your immune system for the upcoming stressors. It's not an ideal situation, but you do what you can. But getting even a few hours of sleep, even getting 2 or 3 hours of sleep, even 1 hour of sleep, even though it's tough on the body, it's still better than no sleep. So just keep that in mind. And the other thing you should also remember is that students who study a bit less but get more sleep get better results than students who study more but get no sleep. So I just leave that with you, but that is important research for you to consider. And it's not just around studying, it's about also in the future, you will have to deal with many other stressful situations. So managing your body and your psychological states is very important. And when you do so, better in some situations than others, or you start practicing good habits, healthy living habits that are beneficial to your body and your psyche, then your immune system is going to function better. Okay, any questions?
No, Professor.
Okay, what time is it?
9:24.
Let's see. So for example, I'll talk about cancer and then we'll take a break. So stress does not create cancer cells, but stressful situations can hamper the immune system. And when the immune system is hampered or it's overloaded, then cancer cells, then the immune system is not as effective in fighting cancer cells. And when that's the case, then cancer cells can more easily multiply. So again, stress does not create cancer cells, but it affects their growth by weakening our natural defenses that are part of our immune system. The lymphocytes, the white blood cells that I have just talked about, natural killers and other cells that work and protect the body on a regular basis. So here research shows mixed results. That, you know, in some cases, deficient or compromised immune system allows for development or faster development of cancer, and in some cases it doesn't. And it is probably the case, well, it's regardless of the research, it is still important to take care of one's immune system, and it's better to have an immune system than as opposed to a compromised immune system. But when it comes to cancer, there are probably, you know, genetic factors that play an important role in determining whether someone will develop cancer or whether someone will not, or whether someone will deal with cancer successfully. So I think that is partly why there are mixed results here. The relationship of stress to cancer, that is. Coronary disease. Okay, so maybe. Okay, I'll end here, and for now, and let's take a 10-minute break. Okay, everyone. So we're back. Do you have any questions?
No, Professor.
Okay, thank you, Narween. Okay, so we talked a bit about cancer. Now, coronary disease or cardiovascular diseases of the cardiovascular system and heart. This is the number one killer in North America, especially United States. But we have more numbers in the United States because there are just more people in the United States, but it's also because the United States has worse diet. There are a lot more fast food places, and that also leads to cardiovascular diseases. But that's just one factor, but it is positively correlated with acute and prolonged stress. So when I talked about the general adaptation system by Sally, who developed it in the 1930s, he said that first there's an alarm stage, then there's a coping stage, and then there's an exhaustion stage. And cardiovascular diseases usually take place when there's during the coping stage, when too many stressors pile up, and the body's natural defenses cannot cope. And then there's a stage of exhaustion, which can result in acute stage of coronary disease, heart disease, and or cancer. Or death. So it results in clogging of the vessels that nourish the heart muscle. As I said, it's the leading cause of death in the United States and other countries. And stress can cause the generation of, or triggers inflammation, which is associated with heart and other health problems. So when the coronary system is clogged up because of high blood pressure, because of bad diet, because of smoking and or drinking or drug use, then the heart muscle is not nourished, and when it is not nourished properly, then it develops problems, or basically you could say sickness. The heart becomes sick because it is not properly nourished by by blood, what's flowing in the vessels that nourish the blood. So high blood pressure, so stress will give rise to high blood pressure. High blood pressure will damage the interior walls of vessels. And when there's damage in the interior walls of vessels, plaque builds up. That is specific tissue. There's a specific tissue buildup in the walls, internal walls of vessels, because white blood cells move in and they repair damaged vessels. And then when that takes place, whatever flows in the bloodstream now can be tagged or can attach itself to the plaque that exists within vessels, and then additionally clog or obstruct the blood flow in vessels. And that's basically how coronary diseases develop and in some cases result in death. So in order to reverse the cycle, it is important to keep the stress level low or to a managing level. And by doing so, you reduce your chances of coronary heart disease or cardiovascular disease. That's, it's, simply put, and it's easy to say, but it's of course much harder to practice, because life on regular basis throws at us stressors. And so in some cases it's impossible for us to move out of the way, metaphorically speaking, from stressors, but still there are ways of managing and coping and behaving better, or managing our lifestyle better, so that we are not overwhelmed for too long by stressors. And when we are overwhelmed, it is short-lived, and then there's a period where we can when the body and our minds can rest, can re-energize or revitalize in order to get ready for future stressors. There are also specific personality types or personality type that correlates with cardiovascular diseases, and this type is called type A. These people are characterized by being highly competitive, hard-driving, impatient, verbally aggressive, and anger-prone. So people who are basically driven to compete, they're motivated to compete, or they compete with everyone at all times, which can be harmful. A healthy dose of competition is good, but when people compete with other people on a regular basis and they don't take time to relax, then that is bad news. And you know people like that. I'm sure there's a person like that in your family, or maybe more than one person, or within your circle of friends, or people that you know at school or at work. And uh, and such people are, more often than not angry, either angry at themselves or just angry at the world. And when that takes place, the stress level goes up. And then when the stress level goes up, it's usually prolonged by additional stressors, and the anger doesn't help here. It additionally fuels stressful reactions to specific situations, and when that takes place and it's prolonged, then it correlates positively with heart disease. So just maintaining this stressful situation or high energy situation in a body is over a long period of time debilitating. It can be debilitating, and just it negatively affects over a long period of time the body, and within the body, the central nervous system and the immune system. Type B personality is you could say the opposite of type A. People who are more easygoing and relaxed. And on average, people like this do not suffer the consequences of coronary disease, or do not develop coronary diseases or cardiovascular diseases. They may be not as competitive and as motivated as type A individuals, therefore maybe not as successful in life. But remember, success and competition carries with it, or brings high levels of stress. So you also have to think and appraise what is good for you in the future. What kind of profession, what kind of people should you work with, or could you work with? The type of people that you could or should socialize with, because that will also determine the level of stress on you and your immediate family. And when your immediate family is stressed out or undergoes a lot of stress, then you undergo a lot of stress. So just another lesson here to be mindful of how we appraise stressors and what is good for us and what is bad for us, depending on who we are and our personalities. So people who are, angry and competitive on regular basis and impatient, it's most likely bad for them to add more competition, more anger, and more stress. And for people who are, naturally easygoing and relaxed, it is probably not the best thing to exist in situations or environments that are even more relaxed and easygoing, because there is a lot less motivation and not enough stress to be competitive and motivated to be successful in life. And success in life is highly correlated with competition and motivation. So people can be intelligent, people can be talented, but if they're not hardworking, if they're not goal-oriented and motivated, then nothing really comes of talent and intelligence. Talent and intelligence helps additionally when there is hard work, motivation, and competition. But it doesn't really help when those traits or those factors are not in place. So that's anger and anxiety in terms of type A, and the opposite in type B personality. Type B personalities sometimes are more prone to pessimism and depression. Sorry, that's type C, my mistake. People who tend to be melancholic, who see the glass half empty as opposed to half full. So pessimism would be, metaphorically speaking, people who see the glass half empty. So people who say, oh, it's probably going to get worse. You know, COVID-19 is not going to end. We're all going to die. This is going to be the end of us. And people who look at the world in a more optimistic and or realistic way, they say, well, this is temporary. We need to find ways to cope. We need to find ways to help each other, to reduce stress and to reduce and to improve well-being. We're going to get there. We just need to be smart about it. We just need to be smart about our choices and behaviors. So that is basically the general difference between pessimism and optimism. Now, there's also unrealistic optimism, which can be quite dangerous or fatal. People who are unrealistic about life events and their abilities to cope with life events or challenges. So people who are, who appraise their abilities and stressful situations in life as from the perspective of only optimism, and say, oh, this is no problem, I can do this. Yeah, I don't really have to study. I'm going to ace this exam or this test. Yeah, this is no problem. I will do this last minute. I don't really feel threatened in any way. Somehow I know I will succeed. I can relax now. That's unrealistic, because life is full of hassles, and life is quite competitive and can be quite stressful. So being realistic about one's abilities, meeting challenges or problems is very important in terms of navigating through stressful situations or preparing oneself for life's challenges and stressful situations. So the best position to be in is to be optimistic, but realistic at the same time. Pessimistic, no. Overly optimistic and naive and gullible, that's also very dangerous, because people like that make really bad decisions, or decisions that could basically, even threaten their lives or end their lives. So here on this graph, you can see the percentage of people who developed coronary diseases. Pessimists are highest because they perceive everything as negative and overwhelming and stressful. Optimists are in the best situation here, and the rest of people kind of fall in the middle. Sorry about that. Are there any questions here?
No.
So how do you think depression correlates? Why does depression pose a serious heart risk or risk of heart disease or coronary disease? What is it about depressive states that would be bad for the well-being of one's body?
the person who's being depressed, he or she is not willing to take care of herself.
Yeah, that's one problem, definitely.
And circulation of blood.
What do you mean circulation of blood?
Um, like my dad got uh, the clock thing in his heart.
Mhm.
So we didn't know it, and he's a very quiet person. So he used to take stress, and some of the years it was having a financial stress too. Maybe he was inside, he was being depressed, and he was doing the smoking,
Mhm.
um,
That
and
doesn't help.
sorry,
Yes, that doesn't help.
yeah, and but we didn't realize anything. Like even he goes to doctor regularly,
Mhm.
but once they found it, it's like 89. Like three of them was clock found. One
Okay.
is 89, another one is 90, and another one is I think 70.
Mhm.
But he was having a stress and depression too,
Mhm.
and hypertension.
Yeah, hypertension due to the clogging and perhaps prior stressors or lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people, yeah, go ahead.
Though he's a very disciplined person,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very surprising for us, for our family members. Like he got those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. But it's also, just with age, people develop sickness, right? It might be related to specific stressors, or because it's stressors or stress in general is unavoidable in life. You can only manage it, cope with it, but it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
It's always there. But depression is a problem additionally because, as you say, but when people are depressed, they withdraw from the world. They don't want to
Yeah.
be connected to the world. They don't want to be connected to their family. And that also, when they are in a world of, additional sensitivity to stress because of depression or feelings of hopelessness or feelings of suicide, then that additionally puts them at risk.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
mindset puts them additionally at risk, and it's not helpful for their immune system. So there are ways of coping with stress, living with stress, and the research shows that um, people who are what's called problem focused do better than people who are not focused on resolving problems uh, in the short term or in the long term. So problem focused coping, attempting to reduce stress directly. So it involves changing the stressor or the way one interacts with the stressor. And then emotion focused coping is attempting to reduce stress by avoiding or ignoring a stressor, attending to emotional needs related to stress reactions. So the problem focused coping is better than the emotion focused coping because the emotion focused coping does not deal with the problem directly. And the problem focused coping deals with the problem directly. And when that takes place, usually the problem is resolved one way or another. But when people avoid stressful situations, let's say people avoid stressful situations by going out and drinking, oh, okay, I'm not going to worry about my exam session. I'm just going to go out with my friends and feel good, feel better. I'm going to deflect stress or ignore stress or get away from stress, get away from painful life situations by drinking or doing drugs or having fun with friends in some other way. Well, that's not going to help. Maybe that can help short term, but avoidance and ignorance, for the most part, is just going to exacerbate or magnify the problem, because that does not eliminate, that does not, an action like that or behavior like that does not prepare one for dealing with stressful situations that will come tomorrow or next week. So even though in some cases, ignoring and avoiding stressful situations or stressors is good, let's say, you realize that spending time with a person or a friend or an acquaintance is actually bad for you. They aggravate you, he or she aggravate you, or they frustrate you. And, avoiding them or ignoring them has actually long-term better effects than confronting them. But when it is a family member or a spouse or a partner who frustrates us or aggravates us, then dealing with the problem head on, solving the problem directly somehow is better, because long term that means less stress for us, because now because through working through the problem, we minimize stress down the road. But when people avoid family members or immediate family members because they find them distressing, then that's not going to help long term, because that's, as you can see, that's going to create more stressful situations, more aggravation, more frustration down the road or in the long term. So people who are problem focused, who want to resolve problems as soon as possible, or work diligently to resolve problems and reduce stress due to resolving problems, long term creates healthier environments for themselves, as opposed to people who react with emotions or emotions only, and they don't problem solve at all. So people who get angry and that's it, and they don't problem solve afterwards, create long-term worse situations, more stressful situations for themselves and for others actually too. And again, we react with emotions naturally, whether it's happiness, anger, frustration, surprise, shock, whatever it may be. This is how we are hardwired biologically. But it is also important to, if we don't naturally focus on problems, coping with problems, then it's important to develop strategies or to change oneself slowly in order to become more focused on problem solving, because that long term is more beneficial. And so this brings us to thinking critically about stress and health, and critically meaning here intelligently and wisely how stress affects us on daily basis, what we can do to manage stress, in what kind of situations we perform or thrive better than others, it is also important to self-reflect, to notice, to be sensitive to how we perform and how we react in specific situations or with specific people, because then that can be used as lessons for developing better strategies to cope with stress. So in general, as you can see, stress makes people vulnerable to illnesses because the cortisol level goes up. That means the autonomic sympathetic nervous system injects more fat and more glucose, just more energy into the bloodstream. And that is basically to engage the fight or flight response. But when the human body is under stress, the fight or flight response is prolonged. And when that takes place, it goes into overdrive. And that means the sympathetic system the sympathetic system overburdens the whole body, each organ. So for instance, the liver, the stomach, the kidneys, the heart, all organs are going to overdrive because of cortisol, and cortisol is the hormone of stress. That means people sleep less, rest less, and when that takes place, the parasympathetic system doesn't get enough time or quality time to reduce stress. So remember, in order for a healthy lifestyle, there needs to be a functional balance between the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system, because they work in an antagonistic way. When the sympathetic system goes up, it usually goes up due to a stressor. And then the parasympathetic system kicks in once the stressor disappears or is lessened. And then the parasympathetic system can engage in specific revitalizing and repairing the body, so that the body is ready for future stressors. But when the human body does not go into repair mode, and because the parasympathetic system is not active, or is active is not as active, or is active in shorter bursts, then that creates an overwhelming situation for the body, and the stress is prolonged, and then human beings move into a stage of exhaustion, where the body breaks down physically and also psychologically. So anger or depression, persistent stressors, and unhealthy behaviors trigger the release of stress hormones. And that leads to high blood pressure, headaches, inflammation, immune suppression, and heart disease. Again, stress is unavoidable, and we need to learn, and we learn on a regular basis, how to deal with stress. Some of us have better methods than others. For some of us, we still have to learn moving forward. But so stress is always going to be there, higher, lower, more intense, less. It just depends on the context and where you are in your life and what you're doing. But what makes a difference is managing stress. Okay, so if there's a way you can find a way to sleep more as opposed to sleep less, then you should do it. If there's a way you can find to eat better and sleep more and relax a little bit more, as opposed to the opposite, then you should do it. Because all of that brings down inflammation, because during sleep, the body repairs itself, the immune system is strengthened, and then when the immune system is strengthened, it can then, in the future, the next day or the next week, fight better, prepare a better defense system for potential bacterial and viral infections. So you can see, looking at the human body, looking at stress from the perspective of psychoneuroimmunology makes a lot of sense, because there is an interplay between how we feel psychologically, what we do behaviorally, and how our immune system reacts reciprocally to both forces, psychological and behavioral or bodily. And the three components, or three types of factors interact with each other reciprocally. That is, there is a push-pull or feedback interaction between all of them. So again, if there is less stress in your life, then you sleep better. If you sleep better, then your immune system functions better. If your immune system functions better, then you get sick less frequently, or you're not as prone for sickness. And when you're not as prone for sickness, then you are in a better psychological state. So you can see that it all comes back. And it's each component influences each other. So that is what we call, feedback causation, or reciprocal interaction or causation in biology. I've mentioned some of the ways you can cope with stress, but here we'll take a look at some of them I have already mentioned, and we'll look at other ones. But personal control, health and well-being. Is the glass half full or half empty? Just going back to the first one, do you feel like you are in control of what is happening in your life, or do you feel like things are out of control? That makes a big difference in how we assess or appraise stress or stressors. Social support. Is your family supportive or not? Do you have friends that can support you or not? Does the government that you live in, or the country that you live in, or the political system that you live in, does it recognize you as an individual, an important individual of society, or not? Does it provide with ways to cope with stress, or does it not? Or does it add more stress? Some governments, some countries create very stressful situations for its citizens by oppressing them, by taking away their freedoms, by creating, by engaging in war, either internationally or domestically, by unfairly punishing its citizens. Okay, all of this is very stressful for an individual. You don't have to look far. There are many different countries around the world. Syria is a very good example. A very long war in Syria. Internationally and domestically, what's happening in Africa now, the Congo and Nigeria, if I'm not mistaken. There are many places around the world where there are conflicts, and either the international conflicts or domestic conflicts. Migrants moving from Afghanistan or the Middle East through Russia to Ukraine, and then trying to cross to Poland, and then Poland blocking them, and then Ukraine or Belarus, that is giving them hope that they can cross to Europe, they can cross to Poland or to Germany, And so, just situations like that are very stressful for individuals. And some of these cases, some of these situations are created by larger forces, such as specific political systems or specific countries. And then lastly, finding meaning in life is also very important, and it's quite helpful in dealing with stress. So finding meaning in profession, finding meaning in relationships, finding meaning in pursuing hobbies, finding overall meaning in life. Why should I get up? Why should I do this? Why should I do A, B, or C? Why should I pursue specific goals? Is very important, because that then allows us to judge metaphorically whether what we do in life is positive or negative, whether we look at life from the perspective of the glass half full or half empty. So personal control is a sense of controlling one's environment rather than feeling helpless. So feelings of helplessness correlate positively with stress and diseases related to stress. So when we feel that we are in control of our lives, we live longer and happier lives, more meaningful lives. However, wherever we live and however we live, when we feel that we are not in control of our lives, or whatever it is that we do, or our fate in our lives, then that correlates with developing specific diseases. It correlates with shorter life and less happier lives. So less happy lives. So a sense of control is quite important. Now, as I said earlier, some governments, some political systems take away a sense of control. People feel that they feel helpless, and because of that, they develop learned helplessness, which means that people no longer think that whatever they do has any positive effects or negative effects, and for that matter. Basically, it means that people, whatever they do, will not change state of affairs in any way. And that is what's called learned helplessness. And when people are in such cases, in such mindsets, then they are prone to diseases triggered by the stress of helplessness, and they also avoid challenges and stressful situations. Because they feel that whatever they do, however they would act, it will have no bearing, it will have no effect on their situation. They can't help themselves in any way, because larger forces are at play, and their actions are really ineffective, or would be ineffective. So, for example, people say, oh, you know what, I'm not going to vote, because it doesn't really matter if I vote or if I don't. The government controls everything, or controls my life, or makes decisions for me, and voting doesn't really change anything. So that is an example of learned helplessness, because perhaps the country that they live in and the political system that they exist in is corrupt. And even though people vote, it's meaningless, because the government has been chosen already. Leaders have been chosen already, because the system is corrupt, and voting is just a facade. It's just, smoke and mirrors, colored bubbles. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't change anything. It's just a nasty game a frustrating game, or an illusion of control. So when animals or human beings find themselves in hopeless situation, or they experience learned helplessness, they're unable to avoid repeated adverse events. They choose not to act, even though they could in some situations, because they infer from previous experiences that it won't change anything. Even though a situation may change, maybe a political situation changes, personal situation changes, or a governmental situation changes for the better, because they've learned previously that engaging in or making decisions, let's say voting or doing other things, does not have any effect. Once the situation changes, the feeling of learned helplessness carries over to new situations, and therefore people just avoid acting, avoid making decisions. They're not motivated to do anything. They see the world through the prism of the glass half empty as opposed to half full. So this is due to, basically loss of control, sense of loss of control due to a sense of learned helplessness, and long-term it has negative health consequences. Hence, a sense of control is very important for a healthy and happy lifestyle. Whether that sense of control comes from within, or whether it comes from external forces, or both, interplay between the two. It is crucial for a longer and happier life, or a healthier life. So that is why people immigrate they move from one country to another, because the situation back home is hopeless. People feel like it cannot get better, and whatever they do does not change the already negative situation, economic, political, whatever it may be. There are no jobs, no prospects. For a long period of time, people move out. And that is why they move, because the situation back home is hopeless. So when animals and people experience no control over repeated bad events or negative events or undesirable events, they often learn helplessness. That is, they have no control. They can exert no control within their immediate environment or broader environment. So there are uncontrollable bad events that leads to perceived lack of control individually or as a group. And then it is generalized over, helpless behavior. To the extent that once circumstances or context change, people still think that they still feel helpless. Because helplessness has been learned. So personal control is vital and also helpful for a long and healthy or prosperous life. It is fundamental to human functioning. So it is important that environments enhance people's sense of control over their world, whether through working, voting, establishing families, pursuing careers. But when that's not the case, then they lose sense of control and they slip into learned helplessness. Now, of course, we can't expect to be fully in control of everything around us. That is impossible because there are specific forces that are stronger than us, and we have to learn how to live with them. But nevertheless, some control or some freedom is better than none. However, the opposite can also be stressful or negative when people have too much choice or too much freedom. So, for example, when you go to a store and there is, you want to buy bread, you want to buy milk, and you want to maybe buy something sweet or yogurt or eggs or cake, and you have 20, 30, 40 different choices, then that can be stressful as well. It can lead to a decreased life satisfaction, increased depression, or behavior paralysis. People stop and think, okay, well then what should I buy? What should I pick? Which is better? And then they stand there for half an hour looking at every product, reading nutritional values, looking at the prices, looking at the marketing. All of this affects our decision making. So, and this happens to me on a regular basis. Now, even though there are specific products in stores or supermarkets that I like and I know I like and are good for me, when it comes to choosing new products, it can be quite dizzying or confusing state to be in. Because instead of grabbing something relatively quickly, you stand there thinking to yourself, okay, why do we need to have 10 different types of milk or 15 different types of yogurt? Why can't we just have 3 or 4 or maybe 2? It would make for easier decision making. The same with types of bread and cold cuts and ketchup with this and ketchup without that, and more sodium, less sodium, more sugar, less sugar. You could spend a whole day at a supermarket just trying to figure out what is good for you. So that is not good either. Too much freedom, too much choice results in paradox of choice. That is, paradoxically, we lose the ability to choose because we have too much choice or too many options. Any questions here or maybe examples from everyday life? I have mentioned optimism and pessimism already, but here we can focus a little bit more. So optimism basically is the anticipation, psychological anticipation of positive outcomes. Optimists tend to expect to have control, to cope well with stressful events, and to enjoy good health. Whereas the pessimists act to the contrary or feel to the contrary. And this tendency or feeling runs in the family. If you are brought up in a family that is optimistic, then you could say, quote unquote, inherit the trait for optimism. Or you're equipped with optimism to deal with life's challenges. or stressors. But pessimism is to the contrary, or opposite, anticipation of negative outcomes. People say, oh, this is not going to end well. No, I don't think I'm going to do that. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to vote because it doesn't really matter. I don't think, what's the point of buying that, or what's the point of going on vacation? There's probably going to be bad weather. You're probably going to get sick and spend all this money, and we're going to lose items. And we're going to lose our luggage, therefore there's no point in flying, okay? Now, if you think like that on a regular basis, then of course, you're not motivated to do anything, and to the contrary, and additionally, you bring people around you down. You make them feel pessimistic. So pessimists expect the worst and doubt that their goals will be achieved. And when people doubt themselves on a regular basis, a healthy dose of doubt is good. Realistic doubt is good. But when people doubt themselves on a regular basis, and they doubt that they will be able to meet any challenge or any stressor in their lives, then they don't live. They don't go on vacation. They don't pursue higher education. They don't go to job interviews. They don't basically challenge themselves because they don't think that it's going to end in any positive way. And again, this is a burden and unhealthy for a given individual, but it's also unhealthy for the people that surround or live with that individual, or such an individual. So if you're feeling pessimistic, it's normal, but it's also treated as a transitory, temporary thing. Get over the hump, good days, better days are ahead of you. And when you think like that, life will prove to you that that's the case sooner or later. But by thinking optimistically, you additionally give yourself energy to act in more helpful ways for you than the opposite. So again, another way of coping with stress is to have familiar support or friendship support from friends, or good friendships, or friendships that allow for a healthy lifestyle or optimistic lifestyle. So it is important to have people who are encouraging, who are optimistic around you, who will lend a helping hand, who will talk to you and who will spend time with you and try to encourage you and change your mind. And if that's not the case, then people lose or are deprived of support systems. And that leads to negative consequences. So positive people, encouraging people, promote happiness and health because it calms the cardiovascular system, which lowers blood pressure and stress hormone levels such as cortisol or adrenaline. And when that happens, when the parasympathetic system kicks in, it fights illnesses and by fostering stronger immune functioning. So again, you can see how a psychological state gives rise to an improved and healthier immunological state. Some people have pets. People love cats and dogs, and I have noticed that during the pandemic, in the building where I live, I feel like almost everyone has a cat and a dog, except myself. And I like cats and I like dogs, but I don't have any because I have other ways of coping with stress. And on the other hand, I thought, okay, what would, if I have a dog and then I go out or go play tennis, or I'm gone for the whole day, then, what will the poor dog do? I can take it with me, but what about situations where I can't take the dog with me, for example? So anyway, I mean, there's a way of living with animals, and and I like animals, but in my case, I don't. I have not resorted to buying a pet in order to cope with stressful situations. But I can definitely see how having a pet, having a companion, having a pet that loves you, that you can, play with and cuddle with, is helpful in relieving stress. So just like people, pets can provide social support. It may increase the odds of survival after a heart attack, relieve depression among people with AIDS, and lower blood pressure and other coronary risk factors. So pets overall have a positive effect on us. And they help us cope with stressors. Now, it doesn't mean that having a pet is always without problems. I'm sure there are some problems related to having pets, but it seems that the benefits outweigh drawbacks. Now, I've mentioned finding meaning in life is definitely helpful in coping with stress. So it helps while coping with catastrophes and significant life challenges. Can help during hard times, and then meaning can be found in many different situations or through different avenues or methods, if you will. So meaning can be found in religion, meaning can be found through family or through kids, meaning can be found through a profession or a hobby, meaning can be found in friendship. So there are many different ways of finding value in maintaining specific hobbies, professions, or beliefs in order to cope with stress. Some people go to church and pray, some people pray at home, some people go see friends and laugh and joke and exchange ideas and philosophies with friends, exchange experiences. Some people, and I like doing that. And additionally, some people play sports, and, for example, for myself, I play tennis on a regular basis, and I find that it gives me a lot of joy, and it's also a good stress relief. But that's something that I have been doing since a relatively young age. And I also can thank, my parents, especially my mother, who has helped me develop my hobby, my love for tennis, and that now it has, because she invested in me when I was younger. And now this is a hobby that I can always go back to. I mean, I can always rely on. But that's, in some cases, that's not enough. Friendships and pursuing specific professions and goals is also very important in cultivating value and meaning in life. Because when we are motivated to do something, then we are usually motivated for specific reasons, and the motivation comes from pursuing specific values. So we think that it is good to do something as opposed to bad to do something. So if someone wants to pursue education, is because they think that education is valuable. It will be valuable. It's valuable in itself, and it might be valuable instrumentally. That is, it might be valuable in pursuing specific professions and just pursuing a certain type of life. Therefore, people say education is good, and education is good, even though it can be quite stressful. Setting up a family, getting married, or getting into a relationship, people do that because they think that it is valuable. Once we pursue something that is of positive value, then we gain meaning in our lives. So that is how value is related to meaning. And when we find meaning in life, then this bodes well in the future. That is, it correlates with longer life and happier life. And when that takes place, our ability to cope with stress, our methods or coping mechanism with stress are much stronger. So I have already mentioned sports, but you can, going to the gym, exercising, even exercising at home, going for a run, going for a long walk is very good for relieving stress. Relaxation methods such as meditation is also very good. Research shows that meditation coupled with, let's say, chemotherapy or recovery from chemotherapy in cancer patients increases substantially recovery from chemotherapy when patients for patients who practice relaxation and meditation techniques, as opposed to patients who did not. Connecting with your faith circles or communities is also very important, but it doesn't have to be faith related. It doesn't have to be religion related. It can be related to, again, hobbies. It can be related to profession. It can be related to sports. It can be related to people who read books on regular basis, reading circles, or going to the movie theater on regular basis together, and then discussing movies or books, or pursuing specific intellectual hobbies or activities can be quite helpful in coping with stress. Because apart from such activities being meaningful, that is, being good, because such activities are done with specific goal in mind and value, they are also distractions in a way, distractions away from stressful situations. So instead of sitting at home and thinking about and having helpless thoughts, it is better to go for a run. It is better to go for a walk, to look at, to look at the world around you. It is better to play a sport with friends, or just or to go for a run. Because when we go for a run, physiologically we get more oxygen in the body. There's more oxygen in the nervous system, that is, the brain gets more oxygen. And when we go for a body, or when we go for a walk or a run, or when we engage in relaxation techniques, the parasympathetic system kicks in. It's active. And when the parasympathetic system is active, it brings down the effects of stress. So it's a way of coping with stress. So you can see there, all of these techniques have positive or very positive effects on our lives, on daily lives. You know, in the you know, temporary, for the moment, within the next week or so or month, and also long term. So when you get into habits of maintaining a healthy lifestyle, then that long term prolongs your life actually, and it reduces stress in your life, which in effect gives rise to a happier, overall a happier life. A happier life and a more meaningful life. And that correlates positively with longevity, just length of life. So stress, prolonged stress and acute stress will lessen your life, and it will basically affect your life, take away meaning and joy out of life. So in order to fight stress, or in order to cope with stress, we need to utilize specific techniques. And when we do that, we regain control and we prolong our lives, and our lives are become healthier and more meaningful. Okay, I'm just going to check what time we have. Okay. Do you have any questions? I feel like I've been talking and talking, giving you examples. So I'll just mention a couple more things, and I will call it a day then. After that is, so I have already mentioned, you know, running or going for a walk. This fits under the category of aerobic exercises, and even though it increases the heart rate, and you know, our heart rate goes up when we are under stress, but this is actually good stress, because it strengthens the heart, it fills the lungs with oxygen, and it distracts and detracts from stress that we experience, or the negative consequences of stress. And by pumping more oxygen into our lungs, there's more oxygen in our bloodstream, and therefore there's more oxygen in our brain. And our brain uses oxygen, and a lot of oxygen, and a lot of glucose or sugar, in order to engage in various thinking processes or cognitive processes, decision making, memory, attention. All of this is possible because there is, you know, specific nutrients, especially glucose and specific gases like oxygen circulate in our bloodstream. Exercises reduces depression and anxiety, because when you exercise, when your muscles are moving, your body produces endorphins, or what you might call natural morphine, and that's a painkiller. So endorphins are painkillers. Therefore, even though you may feel tired, you also feel happy, elated. You feel even sometimes euphoric after a good exercise, a good workout, or a good run. Okay, people usually have a smile on their faces after a good workout or a good run. Even though they may feel tired and achy, they feel happy. So this is also thanks to or due to the release of endorphins in one's body. And aerobic exercise also correlates with reducing the genetic risk for obesity. So, you know, some factors like smoking or drinking alcohol will change their genetic makeup for the worse, but some activities such as aerobic exercise can modulate or stimulate or trigger genetic makeup for positive consequences or for the good. And you have to, this is just a reminder, but our, you know, the genes that we have for building specific body parts and for developing specific biological mechanisms are, you know, are also influenced by our environment and how we function in our environments. So it's a two-way street. Our genes affect our bodies, and through our bodies we affect our environment, but the environment affects our bodies and our genes also causally. So there's a causal feedback loop or reciprocal relationship between our bodies and our environment. And as you can see, we always exist in environment. We always exist in some type of context or some type of environment. And some environments are conducive to successful and or overall happy lifestyles, and some environments are detrimental. So if you don't do exercise on a regular basis, then you should. You don't have to start big and strong and heavy. Just start light. You know, if you don't go for walks, start going for walks. If you don't jog or run, then you should start. Start small and short, and then with time slowly increase the distance. If you don't exercise at home, or if you don't exercise anywhere else, again, get into it. You don't have to start big and long and heavy, but start short, light, and yeah, but whatever it may be, make sure you get into some form of aerobic exercise, because it has really good, all these good positive effects on your body and your mind. And the same thing with relaxation and meditation. If you have never meditated or used relaxation techniques like mindfulness, then you should get into it. Even 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day. Find 10 minutes of quiet time. You know, you can do it in the morning before the whole family wakes up. You can do it at night after everyone goes to sleep, or you can find 10 or 15 minutes, even 5 minutes during the day. You know, even 5 minutes of breathing exercises, you know, inhaling, holding for 4 seconds, and then exhaling 4 seconds, you know, or just focusing on your breath, the way you inhale your breath, air through the nose, and then exhaling. That is a good, very simple, or focusing on your stomach, the way your stomach goes up when you inhale oxygen, and then when you exhale. That can be a good meditative exercise. Listening to music is also a form of meditative exercise. So praying is also a form of meditative exercise. And that meditative exercises, whatever shape or form, they have positive effects on our body because they engage or trigger the parasympathetic system. And remember, the parasympathetic system has been designed by evolution or by nature or whatever it may be to offset the sympathetic system, which kicks in when you are under stress. Okay, I think I will end it here. Do you have any questions?
No, sir.
All right. So next week is going to be our last class, and we will talk about personality traits and characteristics. And your assignment number 4 is due next week. And I think the last test number 3, is due December 16th, Thursday morning. So that is basically the schedule, the logistical schedule for our class and for your evaluations.
Professor, you're going to make it after 9, right?
Say again?
For the test, I request you to make the time after 9.
What do you mean time after 9?
No, usually give it
Yeah, to be open after 9?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. Yes.
Okay.
You can send me an email just as a reminder.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much then. And I will talk to you next week or through email.
Have a nice week, sir.
You too. Thank you.